I wish I could tell you that after the investigation picked up momentum, Richard backed off. He didn't. If anything, he became bolder. The next morning, another white envelope appeared on my front porch. Same HOA letterhead, same self-important formatting, same signature. Only this time the subject line read, "Notice of Special Community Hearing." I stood there reading it twice before I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I finally understood what Richard was trying to do. He wasn't interested in winning an argument anymore. He wanted an audience. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, 7 o'clock, community clubhouse, mandatory attendance for all homeowners. The stated purpose was simple: to address ongoing safety concerns affecting Willow Creek Estates. My name appeared 3 separate times in the notice, not Richard's. Mine. Jake read the letter over my shoulder. "He's really doing this." Ryan didn't look surprised. "He wants the neighborhood to condemn you before the investigation catches up." Marcus folded the paper. "He's making one last gamble." Exactly. Richard still believed public opinion mattered more than facts. Unfortunately, sometimes he was right. By Wednesday afternoon, rumors had spread through the entire subdivision. Some people believed I had threatened residents. Others believed I was under investigation. One woman avoided making eye contact while checking her mailbox. Another hurried her children inside when I walked past. That bothered me more than I expected. Not because strangers dislike me, because fear spreads faster than truth. Once people become afraid, they stop asking questions. That evening, my attorney finally called. Her name was Laura Bennett, sharp, calm, the kind of lawyer who never wasted words. "I've reviewed every HOA notice. And they're weak." "That's good," she paused. "They're also dangerous." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Richard isn't trying to collect fines. He is creating documentation." Exactly what Ryan had warned. Laura continued. "If this continues unchecked, he can argue there has been an ongoing pattern of misconduct, even if every allegation is false." I leaned back in my chair. "So what do we do?" she answered without hesitation. "We let him speak." I blinked. "That's the plan. The more he talks, the more opportunities he gives himself to lie." Thursday arrived. The clubhouse parking lot was already half full when I pulled in. Pickup trucks, SUVs, golf carts. People stood outside in little groups pretending not to stare. Some recognized me, some whispered, nobody smiled. Inside, folding chairs filled the meeting room. Nearly every seat was occupied. The HOA board sat behind a long table at the front. Richard occupied the center chair like a king sitting on a borrowed throne, perfectly pressed polo shirt, clipboard, stack of papers. Satisfied smile. When he saw me enter, he smiled even wider, not because he was happy, because he believed he'd already won. Laura walked beside me carrying nothing except a leather folder. Ryan, Jake, Marcus, all 3 sat quietly a few rows behind. No uniforms, no badges, just friends. At exactly 7 o'clock, Richard tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice echoed through the room. "Thank you for attending." He looked around dramatically before stopping on me. "Our community has faced a growing threat over the past several months." Threat, interesting choice of word. He spent nearly 15 minutes presenting photographs, pictures of my backyard, pictures of my grill, pictures of folding chairs, printouts of Facebook posts, copies of HOA violations. Each piece of paper meant to build the illusion of overwhelming evidence. Most people listened quietly. Some nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Then Richard produced something new. A photograph of the word pig spray-painted across the side of my house. He held it high. "Even criminals sometimes become victims." The room murmured. Laura slowly uncapped her pen. Richard continued. "We have no proof Mr. Brooks didn't stage this himself." Several heads turned toward me. I felt every eye in the room. Still, I didn't say a word. Laura had warned me. Let him talk. Richard became more confident. "Police officers often protect one another. They manipulate investigations. They intimidate witnesses. They believe they're above the law." The accusations became wilder, bigger, less believable, but confidence has a strange effect on people. If someone speaks loudly enough, others assume certainty. Then Richard crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He looked directly at me. "I believe Ethan Brooks has been using his law enforcement connections to interfere with an active criminal investigation." Laura finally looked up. For the first time that evening, she smiled. A very small smile, the kind attorneys smile when someone unknowingly hands them exactly what they need. She whispered, "There it is." "What?" "The defamatory statement." Richard wasn't finished. He reached beneath the table and lifted a thick binder. "This," he announced proudly, "contains months of documented misconduct." He placed it on the table with exaggerated force. "I intend to submit every page to county authorities." Silence. Then a voice came from the back of the room. "That's interesting." Everyone turned. The clubhouse doors had opened. Two uniformed detectives walked inside, not patrol officers, detectives. Behind them came another man wearing a navy blazer with the county investigator's badge clipped to his belt. The room fell completely silent. Richard stopped smiling. One detective spoke calmly. "Richard Holloway?" Richard blinked. "Yes, we'd like a word." Richard forced a laugh. "Certainly." The detective didn't smile. "No." His voice remained perfectly even. "We'd like to speak with you now." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I watched genuine uncertainty appear on Richard Holloway's face. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Richard looked from one detective to the other as if waiting for someone to explain the interruption. Instead, Detective Alvarez reached into his jacket and removed a small notebook. "Richard Holloway?" Richard cleared his throat. "Yes." "I'm Detective Daniel Alvarez with the County Major Crimes Unit." He gestured toward the investigator beside him. "This is Investigator Scott Reeves." Richard forced another smile. "I'm actually in the middle of an official HOA hearing." "So we noticed." Alvarez glanced around the room before continuing. "We won't interrupt any longer than necessary." Richard relaxed a little. "Excellent. We simply need to ask you several questions regarding an ongoing criminal investigation." The room instantly became quiet. Even the air conditioning seemed louder. Richard laughed. "I think you've been misinformed." "Have we?" "No question." He motioned toward me. "If this is about Ethan Brooks, he's the one you should be speaking with." The detective didn't even look at me. Instead, he asked another question. "When was the last time you spoke with Derek Mason?" Richard's smile disappeared, not dramatically, just vanished. The change lasted barely half a second. But everyone in the room saw it. "I don't know anyone by that name." Ryan slowly leaned toward Jake. "That was fast," Jake whispered back. "Way too fast." Detective Alvarez flipped a page in his notebook. "You're certain?" Richard nodded immediately. "I've never heard that name. Never." "No." The detective closed the notebook. "Interesting." He reached into a manila folder and removed several printed pages. "They seem to disagree." Richard's eyes narrowed. "What are those?" "Phone records." Laura quietly folded her hands on the table. Richard stared. "I don't know what you think those prove." "They show 53 phone calls," nobody breathed, "between your number and Mr. Mason's over the last 6 weeks. Richard opened his mouth, closed it again, then forced a shrug. "I'm president of the HOA. I speak to lots of people." "Perhaps," Alvarez nodded, "but Mr. Mason doesn't live in Willow Creek Estates." Silence. "He has never owned property here." More silence. "He has never attended a single HOA meeting." Richard swallowed. "So why," the detective asked quietly, "did you call him 53 times? A woman sitting in the second row slowly lowered her coffee cup. Someone else whispered, 53? Across the room, another homeowner frowned. "I thought this was about Ethan." The mood had changed completely. For the first time all evening, people stopped looking at me and started looking at Richard. Richard recovered surprisingly quickly. "I don't answer questions without an attorney." Detective Alvarez nodded. "That's absolutely your right." Richard smiled again. "There." He looked around the room. "This meeting is over." "No." The detective's voice remained calm. "The meeting can continue." Richard frowned. "I'm leaving." "You are free to leave." Another pause. "But before you do..." Scott Reeves stepped forward carrying a clear evidence envelope. Inside was a bright red spray paint can. Entire room leaned forward. "We recovered this yesterday." Richard stared without blinking. "It was discarded less than 2 miles from this neighborhood." Nobody spoke. Reeves continued. "Latent fingerprints were recovered." Richard folded his arms. So they belong to Derek Mason." The room erupted into whispers. Richard tried to interrupt. "I fail to see..." "You will," Alvarez calmly continued. "We also recovered security footage." Now Richard's face turned pale, not white, gray. Color simply drained away. "Footage?" "Yes." Laura looked toward me. I hadn't known about that either. Apparently neither had Richard. "The homeowner across the alley recently installed a new security camera." Alvarez slid a photograph onto the HOA table. It showed Derek climbing into a dark pickup truck. The timestamp matched the night my air conditioner had been destroyed. "It doesn't prove anything," Richard snapped. No, you're correct." Alvarez nodded. "By itself, it doesn't." He removed another photograph. "This truck is registered to Derek Mason." Another. "This truck entered Willow Creek Estates 23 minutes before the vandalism." Another. "It left 9 minutes afterward." Richard said nothing. Then came the photograph that changed everything. Scott Reeves placed one final image on the table. This one wasn't from a security camera, it was from a traffic camera. The pickup truck sat stopped at a red light, in the passenger seat. Clearly visible through the windshield sat Richard Holloway. The clubhouse became completely silent. No whispers, no movement, nothing. Richard stared at the photograph, his lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, One elderly homeowner slowly stood. His name was Walter Jenkins. He had lived in Willow Creek longer than anyone. He looked directly at Richard. "You told us Ethan was terrorizing the neighborhood." Richard remained silent. Walter continued. "You asked us to trust you." "Still nothing. You asked us to fear our own neighbor." Another homeowner stood, then another. Questions began coming from every direction. "Is that really you? Why were you with him? What is going on? You lied to us." Richard backed away from the table. "No," his voice cracked. "You don't understand. I was trying to protect this community." Nobody answered because nobody believed him anymore. Then Detective Alvarez spoke once more. "Mr. Holloway," Richard slowly looked up. "There's one more thing." The detective produced a folded sheet of paper. "We executed a search warrant this afternoon." Richard froze. "The warrant included Mr. Mason's residence." Another pause. "We recovered handwritten notes." Richard closed his eyes only for a second, but it was enough. Alvarez unfolded the page. Across the top, written in thick black marker, were 5 words: "Make BROOKS leave the neighborhood." Beneath them, a list: false complaints, HOA violations, online posts, property damage, every step, every escalation, organized, planned, methodical, and besides several of the items, 2 handwritten initials. RH. The detective looked directly at Richard. "Would you like to explain those initials?" Richard didn't answer because for the first time in months, he had run out of lies. Nobody applauded. Real life doesn't work that way. When the truth finally landed, it didn't arrive with cheers. It arrived with silence, heavy, awkward. The kind of silence that forces people to replay every opinion they'd formed over the last several weeks. Richard remained standing at the front of the room, one hand resting against the edge of the HOA table. For the first time since I had moved into Willow Creek Estates, he looked small. Not because anyone had shouted at him, not because anyone had humiliated him, because there was nothing left to hide behind. No clipboard, no Facebook posts, no carefully worded violation notices. Just the weight of his own decisions. Detective Alvarez broke the silence. "Mr. Holloway, we'd like you to come with us so we can continue this conversation." Richard looked around the room as if expecting someone to object. No one did. He searched the faces of neighbors who had supported him for years, people who had voted for him, trusted him, defended him, one by one. They looked away. He turned toward me. His eyes no longer carried anger, only exhaustion. "I never wanted this." It was the first honest sentence I'd heard him speak. I answered quietly, "I believe you." The room looked at me. "But wanting revenge and choosing revenge are 2 different things." Richard lowered his head. No one said another word as he walked toward the exit with the investigators. The clubhouse doors closed behind him, and just like that, the loudest man in Willow Creek Estates disappeared without another speech. No one moved for nearly a minute. Finally, Walter Jenkins stood. "I owe somebody an apology." He walked across the room until he stopped in front of me. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I should have asked questions. I should have come to your door. I should have listened." I shook his hand. "Thank you." One apology became another, then another. The woman who had hurried her children inside, the man who had stopped waving every morning, the couple who had shared Richard's online posts without checking a single fact. None of them tried to excuse themselves. None of them blamed someone else. They simply admitted they had been wrong. That mattered more than I expected, because forgiveness doesn't begin with excuses, it begins with honesty. Laura packed her folder and smiled. "I don't think you'll be receiving any more HOA violation letters." I laughed. "I certainly hope not." She looked around the room. "The board still has work to do." She was right. Without Richard, the remaining board members quietly voted to suspend every outstanding violation issued against me pending a full review. The fines disappeared. The notices were withdrawn. Before the meeting ended, another vote followed. An interim president was appointed until a new election could be held. For the first time in years, people raised their hands because they wanted to serve the neighborhood, not control it. The next few weeks felt strangely peaceful. Workers replaced my damaged air conditioning unit. Fresh siding covered the scar where the graffiti had once been. The smell of fresh paint slowly replaced the memory of spray paint. Neighbors started waving again, not because they felt obligated, because they wanted to. One afternoon, I came home to find a small basket sitting on my front porch. Inside were homemade cookies. A handwritten note rested on top. It read, "We're glad you stayed." No signature, it didn't need one. Jake came over the following Saturday. "So?" He looked around the backyard. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" I smiled. "Probably." Within an hour, Ryan and Marcus had arrived. The grill fired up again, burgers, hot dogs, the same folding chairs, the same cooler, the same maple tree overhead. Only this time, the side gate opened. I looked up. Walter stood there holding a bowl of potato salad. "Hope you don't mind." Behind him came another neighbor carrying lemonade. Then another with brownies. Someone brought folding tables, someone else carried extra chairs. Kids chased each other across the grass, dogs wandered from yard to yard. Laughter drifted over the fences, nobody needed an invitation anymore. At one point Jake leaned over and whispered, "Looks like the neighborhood barbecue finally happened." I laughed. Yeah, it just took a little longer than expected. As the sun settled behind the rooftops, I stepped away from the crowd for a moment. The backyard looked almost exactly the way it had the day this whole nightmare began. The grill, the laughter, friends talking over one another, the only difference, the feeling. Months earlier, I had stood in this same yard wondering if I still belonged here. Now I didn't have to wonder. A neighborhood isn't defined by the loudest person living in it. It's defined by the people willing to admit a mistake, to protect one another, and to choose truth over fear. I looked up at the maple tree swaying gently in the evening breeze. When I first bought this house, I thought I had purchased a place to live. I was wrong. A house is just wood, brick, and concrete. A home is something a community decides to become together. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek Estates, it finally felt like home.